The night the stars went out, half my family was erased from reality. Hi, welcome to my channel. Today, we've got a story from r/nosleep that will send chills up your spine. Sit back, relax, and grab some snacks. Before we start, if you have some scary personal experiences that you want to share, feel free to email them to me. Let's get started. Do you remember the night the stars went out? I know you don't, but I have to hope that I'm not the only one. She told me the world would forget. That they would make us forget. But I remember. That night is carved into the rawest corner of my memory, nailed there like a body to a beam. Every time I close my eyes, I see their faces. I know they are real, no matter what everyone else says. The stars didn't go out all at once. Instead, each white light was snuffed out individually, as an infinite field of candles was being blown out one at a time. Lizzie was the first to notice. "Dad," she called out from the window, "the sky is going out." I glanced up from my screen. "That's nice, kiddo. Does it look like rain?" Lizzie plopped her small frame down onto the window nook. "Not like rain," she said. "Just dark. I think the stars are out of batteries." Laura looked over at me from the couch, a perplexed smile tugging at her lip. I winked back at my wife. Our daughter was a treasure, always saying strange little phrases, her imagination a perpetually whirling engine even at 8 years old. The twins, Casey and Connor, were curled up next to Laura. She was reading them a story, her latest children's book about a treehouse and a talking dog. That moment was the last truly good memory of my life. All of my children took after my wife, the same clever brown eyes, the same wild, dark hair like spilled ink. Looking at them all together in our cozy living room that night, any night, made my heart swell with a fierce, immovable love. I cared for them all equally, but I have to admit I appreciated that Lizzie took after me the most. She'd inherited my curiosity and love of mischief, but balanced with a solemn grace that all came from Laura. Lizzie was my little troublemaker, and I was entirely wrapped around her finger. So when she sweetly demanded that I come to look at the stars going dark, I indulged her, dropping down on the padded nook and looking up. The sky did hold strange shadows, lakes of darkness in a starry field. As I watched, one of those stars went out. It was like God pinching out a wick between thumb and forefinger. Then another followed, and another and another. "Laura, please come here," I said. She settled next to us on the nook, gently holding Lizzie close. "Oh my God," Laura whispered. The stars were going out faster now, every blink left more of the sky empty. There was still plenty of light from the street lamps in our neighborhood, but it was uncomfortable to watch a sheet of blackness stretched out in a canopy above us. "Just some cloud cover," I mumbled. Lizzie looked up at me. "Are you sure?" "Of course," I lied. We all tried to get back to our regularly scheduled night. Lizzie joined Laura and the twins in the den, sprawling her tiny form out on the fluffy ottoman I knew she loved first among all furniture. Laura went back to reading, and I went back to my laptop to work on my report. I angled myself away from my family so that I could see out the window whenever I glanced up from my screen. The darkness was a distracting bell and kept dragging my eyes towards the sky. My fingers kept tapping rapidly on the old wood table. Tap tap tap. Nerves were getting the best of me. There was something so troubling about the way the stars went out, their light suddenly dead, quick as a cutthroat. After a few minutes of staring up at the nothingness in the sky, I couldn't resist. I had to check the news, social media. My laptop had no signal. I pulled out my phone but couldn't access the internet, even with data. "Hey, Laura," I called out to the den, trying very hard to sound relaxed. "Can I use your phone for a second?" She padded into the room in her socks. "What's wrong?" Laura whispered. I considered laughing off my concerns, but I knew she'd see right through me. "I can't get on the internet," I told her, glancing back at the kids. "Can't reach anything on my computer or phone. I'm hoping it's just a technology issue." Laura tried her phone. She was shaking her head. "Nothing, Mike. No signal. We couldn't go online or make calls. There was no way of knowing if the stars were going out for anyone else. Was the whole world going dark, or was it just our neighborhood trapped under some dark signal that was erasing the sky?" I looked into the den and watched Lizzie and the twins. The three of them were now together on the couch, clumped all on one cushion even though there was plenty of room to spread out. Casey was trying to steal her brother's Cheerios from a plastic cup. All three were fixated on the television, unaware of the growing concern nibbling at their mother and me. The lights flickered. Shit. They flickered again and went out for a moment before coming back. Shit. 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 Lizzie looked away from the TV. "Are we going to have a power out?" She sounded excited. The last time we lost electricity was over the summer during a thunderstorm. We sat around the living room surrounded by the glow of candles and flashlights and played board games the whole night. Lizzie and the twins built a pillow fort. They were all thrilled to stay up past their bedtime. The blackout was a novel thing, a welcome adventure more than an inconvenience. But I didn't think they'd be excited if we lost power that night. My pulse skipped every time the lights flickered. Laura stayed with the kids while I gathered up candles, flashlights, matches, and batteries. Just in case, I thought, praying that the lights would not go out like the stars even though a terrible certainty in me knew they would. It was the strangest conviction, strong enough to be a memory but lacking all detail. The power cut out while I was rummaging in the cabinet under the sink. I already had a pile of candles of every shape and size, matches and flashlights, and extra batteries. It was more than we could possibly need during a blackout, but something in me pushed me to gather more, to stockpile. Just in case. "Daddy, it's dark," Lizzie yelled out. "Where are the lights?" "They're coming," I said, heading back to the living room, flashlight beam bobbing on the floor. I looked out the kitchen window on my way. The sky was black. Every star was out. The entire neighborhood was dark. There wasn't a light to be seen anywhere I looked. Whatever was happening, it wasn't just us, and that gave me some small comfort. Laura and the kids had already started construction on an impressive hybrid blanket pillow fort. I placed candles in a circle around us, on the coffee table and TV stand, and even an empty bookshelf. A bright camping lantern sat like a miniature sun on the rug. I passed out flashlights so we each had one, even the twins. They immediately began making shadow puppets that dodged around the wall. We sat there in the living room, the five of us, stacking pillows into towers and walls. The blankets stretched into a canopy above it all. Candles sketched shadows on the cloth. Casey and Connor made up a story to tell us with their puppets. A rabbit chased a bird around a tree made from a tiny arm. Laura and Lizzie clapped. I kept glancing out the window hoping the stars would return. Maybe it's just a storm, I told myself. Cloud cover and a power outage. But if that was the case, why was it so quiet? No rain, no wind, no sounds at all, really. It was like we were cut off from the rest of the world, living under glass. Even though I couldn't stop replaying the stars dying out in my mind, I did start to relax and stopped checking the large window in the living room every 30 seconds. I was with my family, we were all bundled together in a nest of blankets and cushions, and the twin shadow puppets were surprisingly agile for the work of a pair of 5-year-olds. Flashlights dipped and wove across the wall. Casey and Connor's hands operated as well individually as they did when they came together. Watching their perfect coordination, I wondered, not for the first time, if the rumors of twins sharing a casual kind of telepathy might be true. "There's someone looking in the window," Lizzie whispered. My eyes snapped to where Lizzie was staring. I didn't see anything in the window except for a reflection of my family, the darkroom, and our candles. Lizzie was shaking her head. "They're gone, but they were just there. I promise, there was someone looking in the window." I shivered. "It's just our reflections, Liz." She shook her head harder. No. I saw them. They were quick, but they were there peeking in at us." "What did they look like?" Laura asked. She was trying to be calm, but I heard a strain in her voice. My wife was afraid. "Laura?" I asked. Even in the low light, I could see she was tense, shoulders pulled close. "I saw it, too, Mike," Laura said. "There was a face in the window." "See?" Lizzie beamed, fear overridden, at least for the moment. "Told you." I turned back to the window, straining to see past the reflection of our room. I couldn't see anything odd, but I believed them. There was something very wrong with the night. Something that felt intentional. Manipulated. "What did the face look like?" I asked. "Stretched," Laura said. "Wrong. I think you should close the curtains." I stood up, keeping an eye on the window like I was watching a coiled snake. Cupping my hands against the glass, I leaned in and tried to see outside. I was terrified I'd find a face staring back at me from the other side of the window, but the street outside was empty and dark. There was a strange rusty tint to the night, however. I looked up to the sky and froze. The stars were still out. Except for one. It was a star I didn't recognize, red and distant. My head ached when I looked at it directly, and greasy nausea turned in my stomach. Worst of all, looking at the red star made me feel angry. My focus began to narrow to one tiny, scarlet pinprick in the sky, like the hole left by a needle going into a vein. "Daddy?" Lizzie called out. I came back to the moment and closed my eyes. The star disappeared from my sight, and the sickness and the rage went with it. I'm not sure how long I'd looked up into the sky. My hands were gripping the windowsill and they were shaking. I glanced down and opened my eyes. The red glow had grown stronger and my neighborhood was bright enough where the houses and trees cast shadows onto the street. As I got ready to pull the curtain on the window, I noticed a small twitch of motion. One of the shadows was moving. The silhouette of a hunched figure peeled away from the shade of a nearby elm tree. Tall and gangly, the figure moved in awkward jerks and stumbles. It slouched into the middle of the street then froze, slowly turning to face towards our house. The thing raised a long arm, unfolding it across several joints. Then it waved. I shut the curtain and rushed to the front door. It was locked and I threw the deadbolt for good measure. "Mike," Laura called. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," I lied, walking through the kitchen to check the back door. Everything was shut, everything was locked. I made my way to the hall closet, rummaged behind hanging coats, and pulled out a baseball bat. When I turned, Laura was there. "Mike, you're scaring the kids," she whispered. "You're scaring me. What did you see?" I gripped the bat tight. "I don't know. Something. Maybe a person or an animal or..." There was a loud tapping on the kitchen window. Laura was staring at me, eyes wide. Neither of us was ready to look. The sound came again, and I turned and I saw it, and it saw me. The creature's face was pressed against the glass, very nearly human but with uneven features, cheeks and jaw and brow pulled and pitted like a crude clay figure. When I caught its gaze, it winked. Then began to bash its forehead into the window. Laura screamed. The figure crawled through the window, ignoring the shards of glass that cut red valleys into its skin. Naked and rail-thin, the thing reminded me of a doll Lizzie had left out on the sidewalk on a hot summer day. The creature was ill-formed, distorted. All I could do was stand and shake. I was rooted to the kitchen floor, unable or unwilling to accept the reality dragging itself into my home. I heard Lizzie scream from the living room, and the twins. Whatever was coming through the window heard them, turned mismatched eyes towards the sound, and grinned. The creature was smiling at the sound of my children screaming. Suddenly, I wasn't frozen, I wasn't afraid. How dare this fucking thing break into my house, frighten my family, and enjoy their fear? It slithered the rest of the way through the window and stood up on spindle legs. The figure unfolded, limbs clicking with an excess of joints. Before it could take another step into my house, I swung the baseball bat. There was a satisfying crunch of bone snapping. The creature's arm broke, jutting off into a sharp angle. I grinned, I may have even bared my teeth. But my celebration was short-lived. One arm dangling, the invader swept me aside and flowed past me, too quick to follow. It was in the living room before I could pull myself off the tiles. Lizzie and the twins' screams grew louder, I heard glass breaking, followed by a terrible quiet. I scrambled into the other room, half crawling. The kids were gone and the window was shattered. Something hurtled over my half-prone body. Laura was out the door and into the street in the time it took me to stand and leave the room. The red haze was even brighter outside. I could hear screaming echoing across our small neighborhood. Creatures were everywhere, as were the signs of damage, cracked windows, scratched walls, doors ripped from their hinges. The monsters swarmed over houses and cars, moving like puppets with stiff strings. Each of the forms had the same crooked but agile build, stretched and warped. One of them stood frozen in the street cradling my 3 children. The twins were crying but Lizzie was pale with shock. The rusty light gave her drained face a sick warmth. Laura was running towards the creature, towards our children, but one of the other monsters skittered over on all fours and dragged her back. Before I could move towards her or the kids, I felt thin, wet arms wrap around me. The grip was absolute. I was anchored and could only watch the nightmare in front of me. Laura was struggling, fighting like a tiger in a trap. She was kicking and clawing and practically roaring trying to get to Lizzie and the twins. But Laura was as helpless. We were both caught. The creature holding my children was rocking them back and forth. Maybe lovingly. It was cooing to them. We all stayed like that for several minutes, Laura fighting, me only able to stare at the insanity taking over my night, my street, my family. The monster seemed to come to a decision. It gently lowered Casey to the ground. Then it was running, Connor and Lizzie still in its arms. I saw Lizzie's small face looking back over her abductor's shoulder, her eyes wide and locked on me. Laura screamed again. Whatever was holding me made its own decision. It lifted me up and began to run in the same direction the other monster took my son and daughter. Several of the creatures fell in with us, insanely fast, a rolling pack of rotting shapes straight from a fever dream. Perfectly quick, perfectly quiet, our procession left my home behind within a few moments. It was like flying just over the street. I noticed, now that I was so close to the things, that the creatures smelled like salt and mold. Faster, we kept going faster. I couldn't hear from the wind funneling past my head. I had to close my eyes, tucking in tight to my captor like a scared child against a parent. This wasn't like flying anymore, it was like falling from a very high place. With my eyes closed and the roaring wind, it was impossible to gauge distance or time. I was carried for minutes or hours, I had no idea. Eventually, the sense of motion ended and I opened my eyes. In front of me was a massive beach crowded with shadows. I heard screaming, begging, thousands or millions of voices crying out. Red light washed over everything. I could feel the single star pulsing above me like a heart in a panic. There was no sign of Lizzie or Connor anywhere. But there were acres of miserable people, suffering in the sand. The tall creatures walked among them, nearly as many monsters as captives. Nearby, I watched one of the horrors bend low and grab the limbs of an old man. The creature began to tug and twist and pull, cooing the whole time. Helpless, the man shrieked, his arms and legs stretching. I heard joints pop and skin rip. All across the beach, the same scene played out. Freaks tore into people, bending, breaking them into terrible contortions. They were making new monsters. I fought, I tried to break free, to look for Lizzie and Connor. The thing holding me let me drop suddenly and I fell to my knees in the sand. I tried to rise but a gentle, firm hand pressed me back down. Looking up, I noticed a new creature next to me. Despite the absolute ruin of its skin and form, I saw that this thing was female. And she, seemed familiar. She held a finger to her lips and instantly the beach became much quieter. There was still screaming and moans but they were muffled. I saw that creatures all around us had put their hands over people's mouths. "Have you missed me, Mike?" the thing asked, leaning down until its small eyes were level with my own. I shook my head. "I don't know you. Where are you? Where are my kids?" The monster smiled down sadly at me. "I know you don't miss me, or even remember me, even though I think about you every day. It's awful, isn't it? To forget. To be forgotten. To lose the ones we love and not even know that they were lost. It leaves an ache in you, an absence that you can't quite explain and can never fill. What can ever take the place of the memory of love? Please," I begged her, knees leaving twin trails through the cold sand. "Please, give Lizzie and Connor back. Please don't take them away." "I'm sorry," the thing said, drawing back to her full height. "They're already gone." All over the beach, the creatures were dragging people from the shore into the ocean. Men and women, old, young, children, all went screaming into the surf, their cries cut off as they were pulled into deeper water. I never saw Lizzie or Connor go under, never saw them on the beach, at all. I hold on to that uncertainty every day, now. The creature who claimed to know me looked down as the beach cleared around us. "I do miss you," she told me. "And love you. I always have, maybe I always will. So I'll give you a gift, Mike. I'll let you remember them, those you've just lost, even though the world will forget them. Once tonight is over, the ones we've taken are erased. Completely. Entirely. It will be like they never existed. Reality will hold no record of them, history no memory. Even those dearest to the taken will forget. All except you. That's my gift, and it's a bitter one, I know that, one that will bring you so much pain. I'd ask you to forgive me, but you don't even remember me, so what does it matter?" The creature turned to leave. It was quiet out now. There was no one left on the beach to scream. "Wait," I said, crawling after her. "Please, wait. Don't." The scarlet light above me grew brighter, staining the night wine red. It became so vivid I couldn't keep my eyes open, couldn't do anything except press my face into the sand. I curled up into a ball and prayed for the dark. I passed out. When I woke up I was back home. I was in bed. The smell of bacon drifted from downstairs. Laura and Casey were eating breakfast in the kitchen. They greeted me warmly, Laura offering to fix me a plate and Casey gesturing at me for a morning hug. Both were surprised when I began to scream. There is no sign anywhere that Lizzie and Connor ever existed. Our walls have no pictures of them. They are absent from all family photos and videos. Even the colored pencil marks I drew by the front door to track their heights are gone. Only Casey's line remains. Worse than any of that, though, is Lizzie and Connor's disappearance from everyone else's memory. Laura doesn't remember her own children. Casey doesn't remember her sister or her own twin. Well, I think some part of Casey might miss Connor. I see her, some days, staring out the living room window to the street. She gets so confused if I mention Connor's name and looks around as if she expects him to be there. Maybe the bond between twins can survive almost anything, and even if it can't, I think some echo might remain. I don't mention Connor much, though, or Lizzie. Not anymore. Talking about them only upsets Laura. She thinks I had some kind of nervous breakdown. That I'm grieving for children that never existed. Fiction. Phantoms. But every time I close my eyes I see their faces. I know they are real, no matter what everyone else says. I have 3 children. It breaks me to know I mourn alone, but more than the grief it's the fear that makes it harder and harder to carry on. I feel a wave of dread every time clouds hide the evening sky. My hands begin to shake when the sun sets and don't stop until dawn. I'm so scared of another night when the stars go out, of what I still have to lose, of what lost things might return. More than anything, now, I'm afraid of the night itself. What do you think about this story? What did you feel while listening to this? Let us know in the comments down below. If you liked the video, subscribe to the channel to see more videos like this. Hit the notification bell to make sure you never miss an upload.